Hey, what's up, Path to Freedom listeners? Thanks for dropping in. This is episode 125. Very excited to bring this episode to you. Today, I'm speaking with Justin Mink. Justin's a professional EOS implementer. For those not familiar with EOS, EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. This whole concept or philosophy of how to properly structure and run a business spawned from the book Traction, written by Gino Wickman, and has really become a movement, across all fields of entrepreneurship. But, in particularly, at least in the world that I live in, EOS has really been embraced by the franchise world, and many franchisors implement EOS in their business. They're encouraging, in some cases, even maybe, requiring their franchisees as they come on board to go through EOS training and, run that system in their businesses as well. And I absolutely love the fact that there's people like Justin out there that, have been through extensive training, not only on how EOS, works and how it should be properly implemented, but how to teach other entrepreneurs how to implement the entrepreneurial operating system. Because one of the most common things that I've seen over the years that I've worked in franchising is that so many people are driven to business ownership because they want more control, they want more freedom, they want more flexibility in their schedule, or at least they want a better balance in their life, right? And unfortunately, a lot of business owners, because they don't lay the foundation properly and they don't set themselves up for long-term success, they end up working harder, grinding harder, and eventually burning out than they ever did when they were back in corporate America or whatever they were doing before they got into business for themselves. And so, EOS is really designed to, help founders or, CEOs or even small business owners, really operate in their wheelhouse and spend the vast majority of their working time on the things that best play to their strengths and their skill sets, and are going to really move the needle in the organization. And then, having a structure and a team around them that they can delegate to. So the EOS system, really helps with all of that. It really does a good job of helping to keep, leadership teams on the same page, working towards the same goals and moving in the same direction. So don't want to steal too much of Justin's thunder here. He speaks about all of this much more eloquently than I do, but he's a wealth of information and, a huge resource. Justin's got experience in franchising. He now works with a lot of franchisor and franchisee clients to help them implement EOS in their businesses. And Justin's a franchisee himself. The EOS professional implementer organization that he's a part of, and the business that he's running, he is actually a franchisee. So some really interesting perspective here from Justin. And, as I mentioned, ton of knowledge. So don't miss a second of this episode. So with that, let's drop in with Justin Mink. Justin, thank you so much. I know you're busy. Really appreciate you making time to be here.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. So for those that may not be familiar with EOS, give us kind of the quick overview. What is EOS and who is EOS for?
Yeah, if you have to boil it down to its very essence, it's a simple set of proven practical tools designed to help entrepreneurs and leaders run a better business, get more of what they want out of their business, and frankly, to live a better life. It's designed for entrepreneurial, growth-oriented leaders who are more uncomfortable with the status quo than they are with change.
I like that.
For those who are not basketball fans, forgive the analogy, but I like to call it the triangle offense of business management. It's it's instead of putting a stranglehold on the creative artistry of one Michael Jordan, what the structured triangle offense did for Jordan and the Bulls was actually channel that energy in the most efficient capacity possible, aligning all the stakeholders and parties in one straight line direction towards the production of a six championship dynasty. So within a structured framework where everyone understood each other's accountability to the business with crystal clarity and simplicity, Michael Jordan was freed to produce championships. So jumping the gun a little, but I love that analogy, and I probably overuse it.
No, I think it's a perfect analogy. And I think one that even, probably someone that's not a diehard basketball fan can wrap their head around.
Right.
So EOS stands for Entrepreneur Operating System.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit of the background, like where did EOS, this system, this kind of methodology of structuring the business in the right way, where did it all kind of stem from?
So there's a book called Traction, written by a lifelong entrepreneur by the name of Gino Wickman. Last year, it celebrated its 15th anniversary in publication. It sold over 1 million copies worldwide. So Gino was brought in to run his family business. His dad was transitioning out of his, to his son when Gino was a young guy in his 20s, a real estate marketing company. And Gino saw the business was in need of a turnaround and successfully turned the business around, ran it for 7 years, and had a really successful exit for his family and all of his team. And as he was transitioning the business to a new leadership team, he spent the next 18 months making that handoff. He became one of the founding members of the EO chapter, Entrepreneurial Organization in Detroit.
Yeah.
And that's when he discovered he had this knack and this kind of passion for the art and the discipline of running a great entrepreneurial business. He started working with business leaders all over Michigan, which is where EOS was founded, kind of right outside Detroit. And he just saw that business leaders were kind of constantly playing whack-a-mole. And there was really no center of excellence. There was no tools designed, no framework, not designed for a monolithic corporation that moves slow, but something for innovative, fast-moving, agile entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And just a set of guidelines, a framework to help them run a better business, and like with the triangle offense analogy, to unleash that creative spirit. So that's when he started kind of cobbling together the bits and pieces that ultimately would form EOS. And there's no magic bullets. There's no like matrix red pill in EOS. You have to do the lifting. It's uncomfortable, but these are concepts that have been around for 100 years. They'll be around for another 1,000. What EOS does is it takes kind of concepts and philosophies from guys like Jim Collins and Stephen Covey and Patrick Lencioni, and really makes it tangible and actionable for business leaders to use in a real practical way in their business.
Yeah, it kind of gives you like a structured playbook of how to actually go about implementing it in your business instead of having to try to pull all this information from all these different sources and make sense of it. And I'm sure at some point in the conversation, I'll share a little bit of, my experience, being part of a leadership team that implemented the EOS system and, how that kind of went for us. But, before we get too much further into that, I'd love, for the audience to hear a little bit more of your background and, how you got to the point where you are today, where you're, coaching and teaching other business owners how to implement EOS in their own businesses. So if you don't mind, would love to hear a little bit of the background and how you got to this point.
Yeah, of course. So I've probably spent half my career in entrepreneurial ventures, and the other half, there's been some overlap, but working with franchises as a digital marketing supplier. So the entrepreneurial part of my career started in my 20s. I had this corporate desk job, and I started this side hustle on the weekends and ended up earning more income and having way more fun than, my Monday to Friday. And that kind of gave me the bug.
Yeah.
As every entrepreneur and leader knows, there's a ton of highs and lows on that journey. And as fun as the highs are, the lows have lessons to teach you that you can take into your next, the rest of your life, the rest of your career. So for me, a big high was sitting down in a park with a former colleague of mine and a founder of a company that I helped take public and grew from, employee 100 to billion-dollar market cap in 15 countries with almost 2,000 employees, went public. And he and I left the company coincidentally around the same time. I'd been there around 6 years, and we said, let's do something together. So we started this was almost exactly a decade ago. We started this crazy music marketing technology company in North Texas called Music Audience Exchange, which is a conversation for another podcast, but raised a bunch of money. And today that company, does tens of millions in revenue and has 80 full-time employees.
Wow.
Still doing really well. Has been through 3 rounds of funding. Followed pretty shortly thereafter by a big low because I ended up getting really sick. I was working the 80-hour grind, and I'm convinced I got mono, which is like a kid illness, right? It's no picnic when you're an adult, especially when you're an adult who's working, their ass off trying to launch a company and engaged to be married at the time. So I just kept getting sicker. It turned chronic. I basically had the flu 24/7 for months. And I thought that was the end of my entrepreneurial career. I essentially thought that at that point, leadership, entrepreneurship was synonymous with chaos and stress and sacrificing health and relationships and time for any other interests or passions in life. And so I went back to working with a digital marketing company called Scorpion and helping lead the franchise team there and growing that business, and had a lot of fun with 5 years at that company. And I learned about a client of mine who actually to this day still works with Gino Wickman as their implementer. He still works with clients. Told me about Traction, and I read it. And within about 20 pages, I had 2 primary emotions. One was pissed off. I was pissed that I hadn't discovered it sooner, because there were answers to questions that I really didn't think had answers. Like, it didn't have to be so chaotic and stressful.
That's right.
And I thought, man, maybe if I it was practical. It wasn't rah-rah. It wasn't philosophy. And I thought, man, if I only discovered this 5 years ago, maybe it would have made a difference. But I was more inspired to get back into an entrepreneurial venture. So I joined a startup agency, going from, a rocket ship, pretty big company at that point, Scorpion, to a small 15-person agency under the condition that we deploy EOS. And the founder, former client, friend of mine with 8 kids, who was on that 80-hour grind, right? Basically his wife and nanny raising the kids while he was locked away in a garage office. He fell in love with it, and it took us about 6 months to kind of fully stitch EOS into the fabric of how we ran the business and to kind of really internalize it.
Yeah.
And over that time frame, our revenue velocity, and this was like right up front when I started with the company, almost doubled. And in fact, not only did everyone, including him, we capped company work hours at 40 a week. It became work-life balance became a company value that we brought to life with a 40-hour week cap. So for me, cool. I just got I lived it, I experienced it. And so I became an EOS evangelist. And when I found out that EOS was a franchise, it had converted into a franchise after a private equity transaction a few years back. It was like the universe telling me what I needed to do, because I'm franchising is my tribe, man. And that's right. And so I never thought that I would actually have an opportunity to be a franchisee that would align with what I wanted to do. So, now I've been doing it for almost 2 years full time, and it's just an opportunity. It's really my calling, because now I have the opportunity, the privilege to help other leaders really experience the same upgrades in the quality of their business and life that EOS gave to me, and hopefully spare them the suffering, the chronic illness that I unfortunately had to go through.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story of how you got to here. And I think very sounds to me like a very, well-rounded, kind of resume, which I would imagine helps you in what you do now, working with a variety of different types of businesses, right? I would imagine just, you not being on one career track for your entire career makes it a little bit easier for you to relate with companies in, different industries or different types of business models. But it's so true, what you pointed out, that so many people assume that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, business owner, that the chaos just has to be part of it, and the 80-hour work weeks. And that's a shame, because you probably know as well as I do, but especially in the franchise world, so many of the people that start exploring franchise ownership is because they're looking to get away from something, right? And usually that has a lot to do with, they're looking to get away from the crazy, work hours, or a lot of travel, and just not having as much of that work-life balance. There's always a financial, motivator for people looking to get into business for themselves, but there's usually a lifestyle motivator that's just as big, if not greater, than the financial motivator, at least in my experience, and the types of people that, I work with to help explore franchising. And, I've seen it. I mean, I've experienced it myself. I was sharing with you a little bit, offline, what we're dealing with in one of our businesses right now. A lot of entrepreneurs get into business for themselves, for more freedom, more control, more flexibility, and they end up with less of it. And EOS is, kind of the answer to solve for that. So
it is for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's funny that you say that. Everyone thinks about EOS as a way to run a smarter, more efficient business, better strategy, better performance, better structure, more clarity. And all of that is true, but the healthy side, the smart and the healthy component, is just as important. And aside from the financial performance improvements that a lot of companies have once they deploy EOS, I'm not kidding you, man. I'd say half of the entrepreneurs that lean into EOS and decide that they want to use it as their operating system, are doing so because there's a visionary, there's a founder who is stuck.
Yeah.
And who feels like the business controls them. They don't control the business. And, a big part of the underlying skill set that we teach all leaders who are running EOS is how to delegate, how to let go of the vine, how to scale the business so that you're not a bottleneck, and how to get more of what you want by uncovering the true leaders in your business, making sure they embrace accountability, driving simplicity and clarity, and ultimately empowering and freeing leaders to live that entrepreneurial life that they got in the business to begin with for, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, you're the name of your podcast says it all, Path to Freedom, right? And it's EOS is powerful in enabling that for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the company that I was working for was the first franchise company that I went to work for, at the franchisor level. My first foray into franchising, I was just a few years out of college, and, fortunately, a couple of years into it, they were gracious enough to, kind of add me as part of the leadership team. And we implemented it, and the CEO of that company was very, very much a visionary. And so I think that was very instrumental for him, in particularly, getting that kind of integrator, right? Identifying who that person was, and like you said, delegating, right? And then for the rest of us, it was, I think, the accountability piece was huge, right? And just getting into this regular cadence of, the level 10 meetings, and, the scorecard that we went through, all of that was really good. I think accountability is always great, but I think the other real benefit was it kept us all focused on moving in the same direction, right? I think it helped us eliminate a lot of overlap, where multiple people were kind of, working on the same thing, but not really communicating. And therefore it wasn't really, that effective or that productive. I think it kept, certain parts of the company from trying to kind of move in this direction while others were moving in the other direction. So there was definitely, I think, alignment. Like you said, it simplified things. It provided clarity. And, I can remember it was awkward, for a while, as we started implementing it. But, one of the things, Dave Pasgan is the guy that was the CEO of this company, great friend and mentor of mine today. But, he sat us all down. He kind of explained it. We all read Traction, but he got everyone's commitment and buy-in that, hey, we're gonna do this, but we're gonna stick with it, right? And I don't remember that he brought in an implementer. I think he may have gone to, a course of some sort or a seminar himself, but we didn't have someone from the outside, in there helping us implement it like I know you do with your clients. But he knew enough to know that like it was going to be awkward for a period of time. And so I think he was really smart to get us all to commit, to sticking with it. And, within a couple of months, maybe, about 6 months, like you said, it was with your company, it just started to feel like a normal part of the process, right? I mean, it was really at the core of, everything we did and how we operated. And it was a game changer in that business for us.
That's awesome, man. It's always clunky and awkward at first, but any new behavior is, you don't hire a nutritionist to feed you cake, right? And so
that's right.
it takes a while. Like when you adapt a new diet or a new workout routine, it takes a while for your brain to your neuro adapt and to your body, your muscles to get used to, conditioned and get out of, a high state of atrophy into a new mode of operating. But man, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you had to reduce it to its most simplest description, create a vision that's clear and compelling. Share that vision with the whole company to attract the people who believe in the things you do and to repel the kind that don't. Make sure everybody understands what winning looks like. Harness all the human energy in the company to row in that direction and drive accountability so that everyone's doing their part and you have a team of people who are contributing materially and can rely on each other to carry their weight. I mean, that's it at its very fundamental core.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's so much else that goes into it and really implementing this the right way. But give us kind of like the high level structure that you're teaching, right? I referenced the level 10 meetings. I referenced the scorecard. Like, just walk us through kind of what are some of the key components that do need to be implemented in order to really follow this EOS system and get the type of results that people are looking for.
Yeah. I mean, simplicity is everything, right? I've yet to meet an entrepreneur or a leader who says, give me more complexity in my business, right? So, so there are just a few, we take everything about EOS is taking an 80-20 approach. How can you get 80% of the value for 20% of the effort? So, the lens through which we view everything in a business, we call it the 6 key components of the business. And we kind of, part of the criteria that I use when working with my clients to determine when they're ready to graduate and they no longer need my help because they've fully mastered it, is when they get what we call 80% strong or stronger in each of the components. So there's 6. Vision, getting everybody aligned on where you're going, how you're going to get there. People, right? Discovering the right people who want to be on that journey with you and really fit your culture, your unique culture like a glove. Data, running the business on objective set of facts, figures, information versus ego, subjectivity, emotion. Right? Issues is 4, getting awesome at lining up your issues as they arise, knocking them down forever for the greater good. Process is 5, and that's just doing the most important things the right way every time by everyone. drives clarity, accountability, more revenue, more profit, actually more fun when it's not a 700-page SOP manual that nobody ever looks at, right? The
Right.
definition of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, traction, which is just bringing the vision down of the business into the ground and executing every day with accountability and discipline, everybody rowing in that singular direction. So those are the 6 key components. And there's a bunch of tools in the toolbox, but really there's just a handful of primary tools that kind of harmonize and orchestrate all those moving parts and pieces to kind of work together in harmony, like the human body. Like you can't have a strong beating heart without a working set of lungs, and vice versa. So it all kind of works together.
Yeah. It really is powerful. So let me ask you this: what types of companies in your experience really benefit from this the most, really need it the most? Like I'm sure it's fairly wide ranging, but your kind of typical client, is this a company that's just starting and they are smart enough to realize like, hey, we need to implement some of these things early on? Or is it companies that are maybe a little bit further in, 2 to 5 years? What is, I guess, kind of your typical client look like, if that's not too broad of a question?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my niche is kind of franchising. So I work with a lot of franchisors. I train a lot of the franchisees as part of the engagement and partnerships that I have with my clients. I work with the IFA as a client. The target market, broadly speaking, for EOS businesses is somewhere between 10 and 250 employees doing 2 to 50 million in revenue. But more importantly than that, the psychographics are everything, just willing to be open and honest with themselves and those around them. Like I said at the outset, they're just more uncomfortable with staying still than they are with change. Open to new ways of doing things, open like your leader Dave was, to kind of being uncomfortable, because unwinding old patterns and behaviors is never easy at first. And you got to get through that initial period of discomfort. But, a lot of the franchisees I train, they're just opening their doors. They've got 1, 2, 3 employees, if that. And they always ask, is it too early for me? My response is always the same. Is it ever too early to establish a foundation to scale a healthy, cohesive business on top of, to create a vision that provides clarity for you and your people, to drive accountability in the organization from the very jump of opening your doors for business? Like, the way that a business will use EOS will evolve as they evolve.
Yeah.
But man, there are elements that I think are even more powerful for a startup that's, just thinking about the pieces they need to put together.
Yeah. Well, I would think it's much, much easier to put this in place early on, when the company's smaller in terms of number of employees. It's just, not as fast paced yet, versus having to go back, and try to implement it once the company is bigger. That would be my assumption.
Totally, man. I'm a 2-person business. It is the business that I'm in by implicitly is me with my clients, but I have an assistant who almost serves as an integrator at this point because we're so tightly knit, and we run pure EOS. We've got a scorecard. We've got rocks. We run a 90-minute L10 once a week, and it's the L10 that we have. For those of you who don't know, that's the meeting agenda that an EOS meeting uses. It's pretty regimented, very structured. It is the best hour and a half that I spend every week. I mean, we are like a well-oiled machine, and it was clunky at first. Even me, like, teaching this, I had to practice what I preach, and it kind of made me really look at myself in the mirror, shine a light on my deficiencies and weaknesses, and hold myself accountable.
Yeah, I could see that, like, that might be some pushback that, if you have a small, company, right? You and maybe just a couple of other people, you'd be like, well, we don't really need that. We don't, we're not big enough to where something like that's really going to help. And it probably does almost feel more awkward if you are trying to implement it, if it's just you and one other person, or you and 2 other people, versus like, a 10, 15, 20 person company. What are what are some of the biggest, I guess, challenges or issues that you've seen EOS be able to turn around, for your clients or just other businesses that you've, kind of witnessed implement EOS and have success with it? Are there kind of some key things that like any trends that you've seen in terms of like problems or issues that it's been able to resolve?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but I mean, if you it boils down to making sure that everyone, as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the organization. So, when I work with the client, the goal is to get the leadership team to master understanding why the tools exist and how to use them, so that they're equipped to then go out and teach their teams how to use them, and they have credibility and authority and they have the comprehension. But getting everyone aligned on the vision, exactly where the company's going and how they're going to get there, and getting it all out of everyone's head and all the murkiness and ambiguity about what winning really looks like, and have the exact same image in everyone's mind's eye about what that actually is, what that journey looks like, and how we're going to get there together. And then it's, ensuring that there is accountability in every seat in the business, from the intern on up to the founding CEO. Everyone's accountable with crystal clarity around the roles they play in the organization. And there's visibility on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual cadence that they're getting their shit done. And they're all making demonstrable, measurable progress, moving in the direction of their vision, and then just creating health, cohesive teams that actually like being around each other. That locker room kind of foxhole mentality where you can be honest, you can be critical, but there's no personal animosity, there's no contempt, there's no finger pointing. It's how do we get better together, and do so in like practicing radical candor without anybody getting ego or emotionally upset when, there's criticism. We're all trying to get better. So, we call it vision, traction, healthy.
I like that. Vision, traction, healthy. It's got a ring to it. If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life, and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. So I would imagine that another challenge a lot of companies run into, because you've referenced this a number of times up to this point, getting clear on who are the people within your organization, that have the leadership potential, that should have a seat at that leadership table. And they have to buy in, to this in order for it to work. How often do you see, a visionary within a company, whether they're the founder or the CEO, whatever the case is, get that part wrong, meaning they've got someone or maybe multiple people on their team that had been in a leadership position that they felt had leadership potential, but then when it comes time to implement traction, maybe it's because of ego or whatever the case is, but that person can't get on board with it. Is that something that you see fairly regularly? And is that something that, founders are willing to move in a different direction if that's what they realize may need to be done?
Good question. That is the first sort of collaborative, real meaty exercise that any implementer, including myself, does with the client is something called building the accountability chart. So it's a structure first, people second approach to building the right structure for an organization to take it to the next level of where they want to go with total accountability, clarity, and simplicity. So whenever we're in the room with a client, like they're fired. You have a leadership team of 4, 5, 6, 7, however many, you're all fired. So let go of your title, your ego, your history, and you're now on the board of directors taking an outside-in look at the company structure and remove all faces from functions. What is the right structure to take this company to the next level? And man, probably any EOS implementer will tell you this. More than half the time there's an implementation. Implementation is a multi-step process over the course of, most cases, a couple of years. But over the course of the first few months, there's typically turnover in the leadership team, especially for a company that's been around for a while and is, operating at some degree of scale, because there's long festering issues. There's an elephant in the room. Somebody's not pulling their weight. Like you said, somebody's an OG that has just kind of been there from the beginning, but maybe like the Peter principle has risen to the level of their incompetency, and so to your question, the leaders who are willing to enter the danger and do what's right for the company's best interest and grit their teeth and face that pain, they're the ones that are going to succeed. The ones who are either egocentric and, want pure command and control, or are just not willing to deal with that pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that have a harder time.
The ones that lean in and then they lean right back out when they realize what needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, there's the danger of EOS as a brand is it's gotten a lot of brand recognition and a lot of people have heard about it. They've heard good things, and there is no dipping your toe into the EOS waters. Like, if you're going to do it, if you're interested in it, it's not going to work. If you're committed to it, just like, if you're interested in your marriage working, it's not going to work. If you're committed to it, you're going to get through the tough parts. It's going to be a beautiful relationship. So you got to commit.
Yeah, I could see that, maybe being a bit of a challenge for you as the EOS brand does get more and more recognition, right? I imagine to some people got a little bit of an intimidating, connotation that comes with it. Like, I hear great things, but shit, that sounds like a lot of hard, uncomfortable work. Do we really want to dive into that? But you mentioned earlier, part of your process, it sounds like, is, working with a client until they graduate, right? Until you feel like, they've got the system in place and they can kind of run with it on their own. And again, I'm sure this varies from one client to the next, but what's kind of the typical timeline? And I know it's always evolving, right? I think you even said, in most cases for years, right?
Yeah.
But what's kind of the typical timeline that you see, or what is your expectation for, how long a company would need you in there, really helping them implement?
Yeah. I mean, every company's a snowflake, right? They're all unique. Yeah. But the sort of the standard benchmark is a company typically will graduate and really not need the help of someone like myself after about 2 years and 10 sessions spaced out over that time frame. So it's a little more heavy up front as we lay down some of the foundational elements, but then it's like you're kind of on a quarterly cadence over a space of about 2 years. And there's some criteria that we use to make sure they've reached certain thresholds before they, before we say, hey, you can graduate, you can keep me around if you want, but if you don't want to pay for me anymore, I will happily celebrate your graduation with you. And then there's a new model that, I've worked with some clients, some franchisors, to use EOS as a means by which they support their franchisees. So that's kind of an interesting thing that has evolved over the last year and a half, really being spearheaded by one of my clients, Horsepower Brands. And I train their franchisees every month. And they have got some software that all the franchisees use, and they have transparency into it. And I help their business coaches kind of train the trainer. And so there's some new use cases in franchising that are starting to gain traction. No pun intended there.
Yeah, no, I think that's fascinating, to me and kind of the world that I live in. And it was Zach Butler from Horsepower that introduced you and I, if you remember. And I remember when I heard that, they were not only, running traction or EOS, within their headquarters, but it was something that they were actively, training all of their franchisees right out of the gate to implement in their business. I was like, holy shit, that is amazing. Like, more franchisors should be teaching that right up front, because every franchisor out there has issues because, their franchisees are not able to scale the business, which, typically results in frustrated franchisees, after a period of time, that are getting burnt out. Franchisors' business models are all built around, franchisees being able to continuously scale over time, right? Or at least that's a big part of the model for these franchisors. And so why not, make the investment up front to help your franchisees set themselves up with, like you said it earlier, a strong foundation from day one.
And you know what else we've kind of discovered as I don't know if you want to call it an unintended consequence, but something else, kind of some goodness that has come out of it. And I give so much credit to Horsepower for being so progressive and innovative, and really being the tip of the spear and helping create a model that will serve the entire franchise industry. But their entire company, corporate team members, franchise business coaches, their executive team, who I also work with directly to do an implementation, all their franchisees, they all speak the same language. They can all get together and talk about rocks and L10s and what scorecard measurables do you use and what are your right goals and what are the rocks that are appropriate. Like they speak the same, there's the same context up and down the business at every level, which is super powerful.
Yeah, it's important, right? Because without that, if the franchisees are hearing folks from the corporate office talk about rocks and they don't know what the hell they're talking about, there's no benefit there. I mean, still better than nothing, right? Because at least the corporate teams, getting the benefit. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. So you guys, how long have you guys been, kind of running that program with Horsepower?
Oh gosh, we're going on a year and a half or so at this point.
Yeah. And so is this something that every one of their franchisees is getting, or are franchisees opting into it? Like, what does that kind of look like?
I train every single one of their franchisees, and I train all their business coaches, and then their franchisees all have access to a software platform that's set up for them to run EOS. It's preloaded with some of the tools and some of the metrics and benchmarks that they need to use. So, and they all the franchisees have relationships with them. Some of them reach out to me on a pretty regular basis. So for all intents and purposes, I'm almost like the in-house implementer for Horsepower. So I speak at their annual conference, and like, it's just been a great relationship. And, I think I think they've seen the benefit, the power, and I'll take myself out of the equation. Really, I mean, all credit goes to horsepower and to EOS for driving some really healthy stuff in that organization.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of really innovative things. I've had the chance to go out to Omaha and spend a couple days, and it's amazing what they've built and in a relatively short period of time. But you mentioned software. To me, the fact that they're developing all of their software in-house across all their brands, and everything kind of talks to each other, and they've got franchisees that are now starting to invest in additional brands under the horsepower umbrella. Yeah, they're definitely blazing some trails within franchising, and I hope that some other franchisors are watching and start implementing some of the same things. So, I mean, what else is like, what are some of the biggest, I guess challenges that, you see business owners, have when they go to implement something like this? And, what are some things that a business owner could maybe proactively do, to maybe avoid some of those pitfalls? If they're listening to this and saying, yeah, this makes sense, but I see this being a challenge, I see this being a challenge, like what are some immediate action steps that like a business owner could take today if, what they're hearing you talk about is resonating?
Yeah, I mean, look, if I would say businesses, it's all challenging. It's not easy. You've got to lift the weights. EOS is a nail. You got to be the hammer if you want to, make it work. And in order for something to work, if you don't believe in something, it's never going to work, right? You have to really commit and believe and lean in. And I see businesses start to get in a little bit of trouble when they deploy certain elements, but they ignore others, because it all does kind of stitch together and feed into, kind of dovetails off one another.
Can't
I would say though,
choose.
if you pick and choose, it can create as many problems as it solves to a certain degree. But if you're a business owner that's just getting started or has never really defined the vision of the organization, and you could pretty clearly, I mean, who you are, and if you don't, tap a few people on the shoulder in your company and say, hey, where are we going? Where are we going to be in 3 years?
Yeah.
What's our ultimate business goal? What are our top 5 priorities over the next 12 months in order for this to be a great year in the life of this business? And if you get a bunch of shrugs, or maybe a couple people have like entirely wildly different visions.
Yeah, a bunch of different answers. Yeah.
So there's a document called the Vision Traction Organizer.
Yeah.
The VTO. There's anybody on the listening can contact me or just Google it. Go on the EOS website, the VTO, and it's essentially 8 simple questions. And you sit down with your leadership team and you answer every question, and you do not move on to answering the next question until you all agree to every single word of every single answer to the question preceding it. That will, in a 2-page document, clearly define the vision for the organization. Share it with your whole team. Use it as a hiring tool to attract the people who want to be on that ride with you. I mean, just creating the vision in that document is a powerful artifact. So you can start there.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. One question I meant to ask earlier, and I want to make sure I get this in. Let's take like a bigger organization as an example, right? You've mostly talked about the leadership team, kind of implementing the EOS system. Say you've got 100-person company, right? And maybe that leadership team is made up of 6 or 7 people. Is part of the evolution of EOS within that organization to keep implementing EOS further and further down the line? Meaning, if there's 6 people on the leadership team and 5 of them have a different department under each of them, are they then going to take EOS and implement it with their department and so forth and so forth? Is that kind of the ultimate goal, or does it usually kind of stop at the leadership team?
That is the ultimate goal, is to equip the leadership team to a point where they can then almost act as like their own implementer in-house, pushing it through the entire organization. So ultimately you're having every department is running an EOS meeting agenda within the department. Every department has its own scorecard. Every single seat in the company has an objective measurable attached to measure objective standard of performance, right? The receptionist to answer the phone in 2 rings or less. That's your measurable. Everybody has rocks, quarterly priorities that they're responsible for delivering on. And they all kind of line up like the flywheel, all turning in the same direction. The entire company, top to bottom, there's an accountability chart with crystal clarity about who does what, right? The entire company is intended to run on EOS when it's fully deployed. Yeah.
Which is why it probably does, with larger organizations, take some time to, get everyone on board and comfortable with it and, kind of in lockstep.
It does. And, I always tell my clients, give yourself grace because, it's a lot. You can't eat an elephant in one bite, and don't over engineer it. Right. You start tinkering and you start getting too into the mechanics. Back out, take that high level entrepreneurial 80-20 approach and use it to create that simplicity, accountability, a cadence where the whole company is making progress together. And that's when it's, if you hover out and up, it's going to work really well. And you give yourself a little bit of leash and leeway. Yeah, it
makes a lot of sense. So, as we kind of wrap this up, I want to give you a chance to kind of, shamelessly plug your services. I mean, anyone listening to this, it's clear you're an expert. You know this stuff inside and out. You know how to teach it and help others learn it and implement it. But for those out there thinking, maybe I just go buy the book Traction, read it, and we kind of try to implement it ourselves. What do you think you're able to bring to the table that's really going to help a company get this right and get better, quicker results? I think I know, what those things are, but I'd like to give you the chance to kind of, answer that for yourself.
Yeah, well, good question. I'm a teacher, facilitator, coach, so I'm not a consultant. I'm never there to tell any company or leadership team what they should do. I'm there to teach them how to use the tools and master them so they're equipped to go and teach their people and their employees and all their teams how to use them. I'm there to facilitate them, the wisdom in the room. There's always an intelligence, a collective intelligence on that team, and I'm there to facilitate them to reaching the right conclusion in the best interest of the organization, holding the mirror up, shining the light on all the warts and making sure that they're addressing it. And I'm there to coach them to performance. Best coach I ever had was the one that was the hardest on me.
Yeah.
But I knew that he believed in me, and he was hard on me because he wanted to squeeze out every ounce of very limited physical talent that I had in my creaky joints. So, that's how I treat my clients. I'm not on the field with them, but I get the privilege of having kind of an objective outside-in look, and I can hold them accountable to performance and coach them and be hard and press and push them in the interest of making them world-class. Right. So that's what I'm there to do. That's what every EOS implementer is there to do.
Yeah. Very well said. I think, outside of you being, so familiar with EOS and how to teach it and train it, I just think that outside perspective that you bring is incredibly valuable. Right. I mean, when you're in a company, whether you're the CEO or part of the leadership team, especially if, the company's been around for a while, there's naturally going to be these biases, right? Or these just, kind of assumptions, right? And so I could really, really see how someone from the outside looking in is going to give some perspective, or at least help people, maybe step back and look at things from a different perspective. And that being really valuable. And then, like with any sort of a coaching, relationship, right? Just the accountability piece. And, the other thing that I would I would point out, I'm curious what your thought is on this, but I think it's the same when, you know, people go and invest in a franchise business and they're investing this money into something, right? It's the same thing if you go and pay a personal trainer a lot of money versus saying, you know what, I'm just going to get better about, you know, working out more regularly. Like, it's a lot harder to walk away from it when you've, you know, made a monetary investment. You're much more likely to stick with it, I think. Even when it gets uncomfortable, even when it gets, you know, difficult. So I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I would imagine that's also part of the value, right? It's just that commitment via the investment. You know, you're kind of mentally all in at that point, right?
I mean, there's a psychology behind it. You know, I had shoulder and knee surgery last year, and I have a membership to this kind of physical therapy, kind of neurokinetic, these like awesome group of guys that you know I go see on a regular basis, and I have a membership so I can cancel whenever I want. And I was going to cancel today because I had a lot going on. I was like, no, man, I'm paying a lot of money for this.
Right. Yeah.
Move your butt, get in the car and get it done, because, you know, I'm wasting my money otherwise. And I'm letting those guys down. I show up and they're, you know, they put me through the paces, and I'm always glad I made the time for it. So there is a psychology to it for sure. Yeah,
no doubt about it. I paid a lot of money to work with a training company at the beginning of the year. And, you know, because I paid that money, I was like, I'm going to do whatever the hell this guy tells me to do for 90 days. And if I'm getting results, then I'm all in, but I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to second guess any of it. I'm not going to, you know, like we talked about earlier, well, that sounds like easy enough, so I'm going to pick to do that, but I'm going to choose not to do that. I was just like, I'm going to follow blindly because it's a lot of freaking money. And guess what? The results are there, you know, and it's to the point now where, like, you know, because a big part of it for me was just getting my diet dialed in and starting to actually track, you know, what I'm eating, my macros, things like that. Now it's like, if I want to, you know, eat that cookie at night before I go to bed, I'm more so not eating it just because I don't want my trainer to see in the little app where we track everything, like, that fat ass ate a cookie at midnight last night. Like, come on, dude. So yeah, I think all of that psychology, you know, side of it is really, really powerful. But man, this is awesome work that you're doing. I really, you know, appreciate you coming on here and sharing with the audience a little bit more about, you know, EOS. For those out there listening, you know, if you've not read the book Traction, go out and get a copy of it, read it. I would say it's absolutely required reading for any entrepreneur or anyone that's considering entrepreneurship. And, you know, probably the type of book you want to revisit once a year or so. And like Justin said, it's never too early to start thinking about, you know, laying that foundation and implementing these types of processes in your business, even if you're not in business yet. You know, these are really good things to be thinking about and, you know, planning for, right? Because I think the sooner you start on it, the better.
Yep. Yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate coming on with you, Wes, and nice job. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. We'll stay in touch, and we'll have you come back at some point. And you know, I'm sure there's plenty more, you know, that we could talk about. But where can people find you, connect with you, get more information on EOS, on your services, point folks in the right direction?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I post every day, mostly EOS related stuff. So just look up Justin Mink. My EOS website where you can contact me, and I've got all kinds of videos and stuff posted, is eosworldwide.com/Justin-Mink. So, and my email, just email me. I've got a new weekly newsletter called the Weekly Woosah that launches on Sunday. So I don't have a URL for it just yet. We're about to finalize it, but you can always email me at justin.mink@eosworldwide.com.
I love that. The Weekly Woosah. Well, look, we'll put all those links in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. But Justin, really appreciate you, man. Thanks for everything you're doing out there to help entrepreneurs be more successful. Keep up the great work.
Likewise, Wes. Have a good one, man. Thank you.
You too.